Hi there. Well, here we are the day before Thanksgiving, and I'd like to go back to Luke 17, right? The story there where out of 10 lepers who had been healed of their leprosy, only one came back to Jesus to thank him. And I've been thinking a lot about that story because it raised a question for me that you don't find any answer for in any of the commentaries. Now, if you know the story, you'll know that 10 men with leprosy asked Jesus to have pity on them. And of course, leprosy is a terrible disease. And in that culture, you were also considered unclean, which meant you had to separate yourself from your community. You were shunned, right? The only people you could associate with were other lepers. It's why we see these 10 men together, no doubt part of a leper colony. But all of them had faith that they would be healed. Right? There's no other explanation for the fact that when Jesus said to them, "Go show yourselves to the priests," they all went, even though they'd not been healed yet. You know, it's the priest's job to determine whether they were clean or unclean. He was the one who would have given them the okay to re-enter society. So all 10 men hurried off to see the priest. And it says that as they went, they were cleansed. Their faith had made them clean again. But one man experienced a deeper healing. You know, I'm sure they were all very excited and no doubt running down the road to see the priest so that they could be pronounced clean and, be able to see their loved ones again. But one man put Jesus first. He turned back on the road, praising and glorifying God, and he threw himself at the feet of Jesus, giving him thanks. And Jesus said to him, "Your faith has saved you." Some translations say your faith has made you well, but of course they were all made well. The specific word that Jesus used there means saved. Something profound had happened to this man's heart that caused him to turn to Jesus and worship him. You see, I think he came to see that the true gift was Jesus himself, not the healing. Right? It was Jesus he was thankful for. He was worshiping the giver, not the gift. Because one of the dangers is that we can be more in love with what Jesus can do for us than with Jesus himself. But the thing I really wanted to comment on here was the thing that raised the question for me was the fact that this man was a Samaritan. Jesus said, only one man has returned to give thanks, and he is a Samaritan. He was making a point. I think the implication is that the other 9 men must have been Jews. And Jesus had met them in this village where Samaria bordered Galilee, and no doubt there would have been tensions in those borderlands, because as you may know, Jews and Samaritans, they didn't get along. They resented one another. And their bitter kind of rivalry went back centuries. Jews viewed Samaritans as unworthy to be in God's kingdom. They were considered unclean, and so they would have nothing to do with them. They shunned them. And so when Jesus made the point to his largely Jewish audience that only one man had returned to give thanks, and he was a Samaritan, he was pointing out their prejudice. But here's the fascinating thing. There didn't seem to be any prejudice among the 10 men when they had leprosy, did there? I mean, they all stood together asking Jesus for mercy, right? They were a colony of Jews and Samaritans together. How come? Well, because they were all unclean, right? They were all in the same boat. It's hard to be prejudiced when you're in the same boat. But can you see? That is a picture of us, of all mankind, because we were all unclean before God. The Bible says all have sinned, all fall short of God's standards. There's no one who's righteous, not even one. We were all, like those lepers, under the sentence of death. And if we've been healed of that, if we've been forgiven and made clean by Jesus, then it is only by God's grace for which we should be truly thankful. But what that means is that we shouldn't look down on or denigrate others who are different from us, whether that's ethnically, politically, or ideologically, right? We all like to think our own tribe is better than the others, but the Bible doesn't agree. It says we've all sinned. We were all in the same boat, and we're saved by grace alone. So if you allow me, let me just conjecture What would have happened after those 10 men were declared clean? You see, I reckon the Jewish men may well have gone back to their old party lines, seeing this Samaritan man as an outsider. It's quite likely that they would have shunned him, even though he'd once been a part of their colony. Imagine that, shunned by former lepers. But as for the Samaritan, I reckon because his heart had been healed and he was so full of gratitude for Jesus and the grace that he'd been shown, I think it's likely he would have been full of grace towards the others. He would have reflected the loving attitude of his master, who had once asked a Samaritan woman for a cup of water at a well, which ended with the whole Samaritan village coming to believe in him. So, who are you most like in this story? Think about it. And happy Thanksgiving.